Reverend Nathaniel W. Martin. Here's Reverend Martin.
Thank you, Dr. Blackwell. Let me say, Hotep, Abaragani, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, but certainly never good night, and in my lifetime, never ever goodbye. I'm Pastor Nathaniel Wayne Martin, the pastor of the New Life Institutional Baptist Church here in the city of Los Angeles, and we're worshiping with our sister church, the host church, the Shiloh Missionary Christian Church, pastored by my good friend, the Reverend Dr. Della F. Hollinas. And this being Good Friday night, we'll be having the 7 last sayings. And if you're in the area, we invite you to come on by and share in the service, 8916 South Main. You can park over by the school, and you can park on the parking lot. But by all means, do come and share. You'll be blessed. This offering that you are viewing is a presentation in more of a social justice bent, proclivity, or inclination, entitled It's Time. And what is it time for? It should always be time for justice. And that brings us to the environmental as well as the economic component of justice, because if there's one group in the United States that has been exploited and marginalized and subjected, other than the native Indians, who were the original owners of this land, it is, of course, were the descendants of the African slaves who were, the descendants of the Africans who were kidnapped from their continent, whether it would be Ghana or Benin or Senegal, and packed in the holds of ships like sardines and transported against their will thousands of miles to this settler colonial empire, and unloaded as property, as in slaves. Not saying that we were slaves in Africa, but saying that we were made slaves once we were unloaded off the ships in Jamaica and the Caribbean, Barbados, and of course ultimately on the shores of the United States. Nicole Hannah-Jones has a project which she calls the 1619 Project, which competes with the narrative, settler colonial narrative, that 1776 is the story of the founding of America, but she says actually it's 1619, when the first 20 enslaved persons were sold off of that White Lion there in that town. That was really the founding of America, because America has always been a profit-driven enterprise, and the 13 colonies, of course, were no different. And having been purchased by the settlers, remember they're talking about 1619 as opposed to 1620 or 1776. As far back as 1619, the settler colonial powers were dealing in enslaved persons, or enslaving persons primarily of my hue or darker, from, of course, the continent of Africa, because more than gold, it was found that traffic in human beings was a lucrative and a money-making, wealth-producing enterprise. And so that is why the continent of Africa, for a section, became known as the Gold Coast, not because of the mineral gold that was located there. No, they brought that too, but they found that they could make more money selling people into slavery. Other people were buying other people who were being sold in turn by other people. And so that was the highest money-making, profit-making enterprise. And naturally, the narrative says that 1776, the Declaration of Independence, all men are created equal narrative, but really it's the 1619 narrative when they began to import human beings and sell those human beings into slavery, not as indentured servants, no, as chattel slavery, portable property, portable, movable property, that a person could, a white person in this instance, could do with as they wished. All right, now, and so that is why we are celebrating the establishment of the first reparations commission in the country, which is right here in California, and they have been meeting since January, and they have formulated their first plan to pay the people, descendants who can trace their lineage back into slavery. In other words, there were slaves in their family. And even though that itself opens up another can of worms, because the white plantation owners could likewise say, well, there were slaves in our family. You were the slave, and we should get that money too. So it's going to be interesting as the kinks are worked out, because you know there's a storm cloud rising. All right. As we are looking at the progress our people have made, sometimes incrementally, and sometimes glacially, sometimes one step forward and two steps back, as it were, we've come to the town of Mason, Tennessee. Mason, Tennessee was just a little railroad town, had the railroad running through the middle of it, and it was run by the plantation owners, because the predominant crop in Tennessee was cotton in that time. And of course that means that the plantation owners were in charge, and that after slavery and the slaves were emancipated, then of course then the people, a lot of the people, had to continue to work the same land that they had been slaves upon, but supposedly getting a salary now. And what by the turn of the century, the landowners had come up with what they call a scheme of sharecropping, where the policy was that the Negro family would work the land, the black family would work the land, and the landowner, who was always white, would share, take 50% of the profit if it's supposed to be split evenly. Of course, you know that equity and equality is not an inherent characteristic of the United States. And so consequently there were always inequities and inequalities and disparities because the landowner had the power, he had the company store, and the sharecropper had to either make do or else go purchase things from the store owner. Long story short, when the time for selling up would come, of course, in addition to the other inequities and unequal divisions of that sharecropping system, because the sharecropper couldn't set a price. The price was set by the landholder, the landowner, and he could take the property, the crop, or the production of the sharecropper and then go to the railroad and sell it at what price that he felt. And then he did not really have to honestly tell the sharecropper what the cotton was sold for, if you see where I'm going with this. So consequently, the sharecropper was always in the hole. He never got out the hole, because between the inequity of the price that the landowner sold the cotton for and the price he reported to the sharecropper, and then the sharecropper having to trade up at the landholder's store for everything, that means clothing. If you broke a tool, you had to buy the tool from the landowner. And so it was a system that was better than slavery for the landowner, because now the sharecropper was responsible and had to pay the landholder for his very existence. And so you can see the inequity that resulted so this was the condition there in Tennessee, and we're talking about Tipton County and the little town of Mason, which was predominantly black, but was controlled and ruled and dominated up until 2016 by those people that we call white. And in 2016, an election was held, and suddenly Mr. Emmett Gooden and Miss Virginia Rivers were elected mayor and vice mayor. And the background of this situation or event I've already told you about, but let me hasten to add that Mason was run by white people, and those white people had embezzled and they had stolen and they had borrowed from the general fund and in ways that were illegal since 1995, and then again in 2012. I said it was run by white folks. It had been, even though it was predominantly black population, the people in power to do things were, of course, not these people who were nominally designated the value black, but it was the people who were nominally designated the value of being white, who had run the town as they saw fit. And as we said, in 1995, they had embezzled. Not that they hadn't embezzled before then, but in 1855, the town was formally established. And then, of course, 1855, you know, that was slavery. And then 1865 was the end of the Civil War and the end of slavery. and you can discount the 7 golden years, and then black disenfranchisement from voting had been established, because remember, this was the land of Nathan Bedford Forrest, and so consequently he was a ruthless Civil War general, and what I mean by ruthless, he was ruthless and cruel, and he was the one that coined the phrase "get there first is with the mostest." He attacked the Union Army, but of course he was no friend of the enslaved, I should put it that way, to be charitable. And so under that rubric, that is where this town of Mason had been established. So then by the end of the Civil War, and after the so-called 7 golden years that W.E.B. Du Bois talks about, then of course the white population did not want the black population to vote, and so they stopped that. How did they do that? At that time, it was direct intimidation, violence. If you want to vote, you're going to have to get off my land, all of that type of intimidation. And so no black people were voting by the time of the founding of Mason on down until I guess after 1968, maybe they began voting. But of course, they still didn't have any power, talking about they being the black people who are under the subject of the and mercy of the landowner. Like we said, most of the land was owned by the white people. But then, of course, subsequent years, the black people were able to eke out a living and purchase land, and some people have 200 acres and all of the like of that. But long story short, the town was run in the ground, but not by the black people, because the first black administration didn't come in until 2016. And like I have referenced, 1995, that was embezzlement done by those who were in charge and in power, and that was the, of course, white landowners, white who had been formerly the plantation owners, and they didn't see any reason to change. Remember, Andrew Johnson was from Tennessee. Andrew Johnson assumed the presidency after the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. That was way back, of course, in 1865. And of course, he was no friend of the formerly enslaved. He didn't have any sympathy or love for the slave. He just wanted to be the fact that the landowning class had looked down upon his class, and now he was in the position of the president of the United States, and they being rebels who had waged war against this nation, he was able to work deals or work deals where they would have to come to him, and they would have to bow down, I imagine, and beg his pardon, and then he would grant them, if they would take an oath of allegiance, then of course he would expedite their re-entry into the government of the United States. A lot of times these were people who had committed, well, in all cases they were people who had committed treason against this nation. And these traitors, instead of being hung, they were pardoned, and a lot of them went right back into the Congress, right back into the legislatures, because like I said, they began to repress the few black people that did want to vote, and they were very successful in driving the black person away from the voting booth. And that's why I look askance at those that say votes don't matter. Voting matters. If it didn't matter, why did they keep us from voting? Why do they intimidate? And why do they lynch? And why do they prohibit if voting doesn't matter? Stennis and Jesse Helms and Strom Thurmond and all that ilk, if voting don't matter. Mr. Rankin and Mr. Bilbo, and all of those hundreds of politicians who ascended into the seats illegally because they were only representing one particular portion of the populace. They were not representing the black populace. They didn't even want the black populace to vote. They didn't even let them vote. Paul Robeson famously got into hot water about when he was called before the House Un-American Committee and Senator Stennis. Oh my God! Talk about a reprobate. And Paul Robeson withstood him to his face and told him he was illegally occupying that seat. And he was. Because the Negroes hadn't voted for him because Negroes wasn't allowed to vote. They wouldn't have voted for him. They would have voted for somebody that would have represented their interest. That's why you vote. That's why voting matters. That's why elections count. And so Mason, Tennessee, as I began to wrap this up, because I'm not going to get forward with it, the black administration came in 2016. Now, the kicker. In all of this time, the town had been left alone. But when Ford Motor Company decided that they would come down there and build their electrical vehicles and F-150 trucks there in that general vicinity. I think they want to be up in Stanton, which is about 10 miles down the road, according to Mr. Blackwell, who has family there. He's from Memphis. All of a sudden, then white folks began to see, well, look at here. There's money in Mason. And so the governor and the state comptroller, told the black administration, said, y'all need to turn in y'all's charter. Black folks said, no, we just got in the seat in 2016. We can't turn in our charter. Why you didn't come back and why didn't you do all of that in 1995 or in 2012 or before 1995? All of that stealing, was going on for generations. And now you coming here when Ford Motor Company about to drop $5.4 billion investment in the town, in the area, and that this little town of Mason stands to benefit. Now all of a sudden you want to close the town of Mason and envelop it up into Tipton County. Well, that's always been the trickeration of the ruling class. I hate to say white folks so much. The ruling order. And they look ahead, they see what's coming, and they make their plans how they're going to profit. And for them to profit, they basically don't want any black person at the table to profit. If you do, they want to give you kibbles and bits. And so consequently, that is the situation. And they went to the comptroller, comptroller, C-O-M-P-T-R-O-L-L-E-R, the comptroller, which is a financial analyst who audits 5 minutes. All right. Who regularly audits, is supposed to audit the books of any metropolis and the county and the state and see how there is any malfeasance. Went to court and the judge ruled in the comptroller's favor. So even though Mason was represented by the NAACP, the law firm, they were unsuccessful in getting an injunction, a stay, to keep their town as it was. So this is the condition that they are confronting at this moment. And we wish them well, but we know how things have gone in this nation. And we know that not only was Mason, Tennessee, taken over, but a whole lot of other black towns, or towns that were predominantly black, have disappeared. Elaine, Arkansas comes to mind. The Wilmington, North Carolina comes to mind. And the Red Summer of 1918 and 1919 comes to mind, when a lot of black persons were lynched and hung and shot and murdered, and it was indiscriminate. They shot the men, they killed the women, and a lot of women they raped, and they shot the children, and those that wasn't shot had to get out of town, just like they did down there in Tulsa. They had to get out to keep from getting killed, even though Tulsa became a success story in spite of. It doesn't change the fact that the ruling powers sought to use their power to keep all the black people from voting and from having property. And when they saw that the black people were being successful with their property and with their businesses, why in many cases they attacked, meaning the ruling power attacked and eliminated that business, whether by violence or by the pen. If the pen is mightier than the sword, and if you play dominoes, you know you got to watch that pencil. And so that was that is the situation down in Mason, Tennessee. And so we hope for the best for them. Now, as I get ready to close, I better give you my reparation scripture, which is in Deuteronomy chapter 15, beginning at verse 12, which says, "And if thy brother, an Hebrew man or a Hebrew woman, be sold unto thee and serve thee 6 years, then in the 7th year thou shalt let him or her go out free from thee. And when thou settest them free, thou shalt not let them go away empty, but thou shalt furnish them liberally out of thy flock and out of thy floor and out of thy winepress, of that wherewith the Lord thy God hath blessed thee, thou shalt give unto them." And the Ephesians 6th chapter, 11th and 12th verse says, "Put on the whole armor of God, therefore, that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places." I'm paraphrasing some of that because my time is up. But I wanted to get those verses in there because they are our marching orders. And I say to you, as the unions have gotten Amazon is now a union in the state of California. Starbucks wants to get a union, and so that because they can have collective power, as power in union. Don't fool yourself. And that's what Walmart and all of the other corporations have always fought against the union. So God bless the laboring people, and as we say, if they don't want to pay you, don't work for them. Thank you, Doc. We're out of here.
Sometimes my clouds hang low.